It's really a complete pleasure to be here this morning, and I've been on book tour for the past 6 to 8 weeks around this book, traveling far and wide around the country, speaking to both Jewish audiences and, frankly, more so to non-Jewish audiences, which is somewhat startling to the degree to which this book has received interest from groups of engineers, universities, graduate programs, business groups, and so forth. It speaks to a growing awareness of the fact that we have a troubled water present and a possibly grave water future. Now, it's possible that we'll get ahead of the innovation curve. It's possible we'll all do what we have to do. But I would say that, frankly, in the US and around the world, our leaders, political leaders, our civic leaders, have permitted us to sleepwalk into what is a growing water crisis. Now, in water-rich Boston, you may not be feeling it as much. But I want to tell you how I came to write the book and to put some context in this. About 4 years ago, just before David permitted me on the trip, I attended a not very well-attended seminar at a think tank in New York that I'm a member of called the Council on Foreign Relations. It's a foreign policy group. And what I learned at this seminar was that, and this it was presented by a man from the U.S. government, from the National Intelligence Council, which is one of the key parts of our national intelligence infrastructure. This fellow, a retired U.S. Air Force general, presented the rather remarkable fact that 4 years ago, I didn't know, it was before there was a huge awareness of California and California's water problems. He said that we are descending into a global water crisis, that by the year 2025, which then seemed like a very long time away, but now is only 9 years away, he said that by 2025, 60% of the world's landmass would be experiencing water scarcity problems. I later learned from another U.S. government report that said that by 2025, 40 of our 50 U.S. states will be experiencing water scarcity. Now, leaving that seminar, I had two reactions. And I suspect, given that this is a JNF audience, I suspect that many of you might have had the same reaction. My first reaction was, hey, I'm a pretty well-informed citizen. How come I never heard about this before? By the time the word crisis gets in the sentence, I should have known about this, but I didn't. And the second thought I had was, as a fairly frequent visitor to Israel, was what is this going to mean for Israel? I knew a lot about Israel's politics, its history, its security situation, but what I didn't know, what I found out in the coming days, was that Israel, despite the fact that it's 60% desert and the rest of the country is semi-arid, that Israel has the world's most sophisticated water system. Now, for those of you who are JNF veterans, probably many of you already knew that. But for me, it was remarkable. So juxtaposing two remarkable things at once. First is hearing that we're descending into a global water crisis and realizing that our leaders are not aware of it, and if they are aware of it, they're not doing much about it. And on the other hand, learning that Israel has the world's most sophisticated water management system, I said, this is totally remarkable. It's a problem, but it's a problem with a solution. There's a role model for the world to follow, but here's the problem. Nobody knows it exists. Nobody knows it's there. And I say nobody. Obviously, again, some of the people in this room knew about it, but not enough people knew about it. So that was the day that I make the decision that this is a story I want to tell. Now, it's been a wonderful journey. I've been back and forth to Israel many, many times. I interviewed over 220 people for the book. I wanted to get a kaleidoscopic and 360-degree view of the water story of Israel, and I believe I achieved that. And then in the telling of the story, what I believe I have come up with, and I say this to a room full of people who are friends of Israel and fans of Israel, I believe that I, not by design, but stumbled upon perhaps the best story we can now tell about Israel. At the very moment that the world is going into a global water problem, at a time when everywhere, countries large and small, wealthy and poor, are facing water problems, at that very moment, Israel has an abundance of water. How great is that abundance of water? Let me give you some metrics. Let me give you some numbers that will help you understand this. When you generally look at a country's water problems, you look at two or three things. You look, first of all, at their population, you look at their economy, and you look at their natural available water. So since 1948, when Israel achieved independence, Israel's population has grown tenfold, the fastest growth in the world in that time period. In that same time period, Israel's economy, its GDP, has grown 70-fold, among the fastest in the world. Now, those two factors alone should bespeak a huge water problem. Add to that thanks to climate change, since 1948, Israel's rainfall has declined by 50%. And yet, even so, Israel is so water abundant today that it exports its water in many forms. First, as water to the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, to the Kingdom of Jordan, and significantly for people in the region who are now refugees from crises elsewhere. In addition, as you know, Israel has a multi-billion-dollar export industry of agricultural products. And think about for a moment what really is agriculture other than value-added water. Take a seed, put it in the soil, maybe just in sand in the case of Israel, add lots and lots and lots of water, and you have a value-added product which you are then exporting. And only a country that would be so sophisticated and so confident of its water future would permit itself to export every year billions of dollars of tomatoes and peppers and melons and cucumbers and other products to countries around the world. Now, I tell all this story in my book. I tell how it came about. It's a book that is not intended necessarily, you don't need an MIT PhD in engineering to follow it. In fact, I'm a liberal arts guy, and the hardest part of the book was trying to understand what they were talking about when they're talking about reverse osmosis and the other things that our speaker earlier seems to understand from the time he was a little boy. But I think that I'll take a moment or two to share with you, and again, you don't have to read the book, but this is in the book. One of the challenges when I decided to write the book was, where do you start the story? If you're going to tell a moving, dramatic, hopefully inspiring story, what's the beginning point? Now, frankly, one could start at the most foundational moment. The very first words of the Hebrew Bible suggest that before there were the heavens and the earth, there was the water. God creates the heavens and the earth, and on the face of the waters, there was chaos. Well, where and how was there water before there was anything else? So I could start by saying there was water before any other material thing existed in the world. But I chose not to go that far back. I could have also started back in the time of the Bible and talk about Moses striking the rock and how instructive that is, because God provides manna for the children of Israel as they wander in the desert, but God does not provide the water. He instructs man to be his partner in the production of water. I could have started there, but again, chose not to. And I was tempted to start the book in 1902 when Theodor Herzl publishes Alt Neuland, his novel talking about the future land of Israel and what the land of Israel will look like. And in his novel, he has his main character say that the heroes of the land of Israel will be not the generals, not the prime ministers. He says the heroes of the land of Israel will be its water engineers. So from its first days, before it was a country, when the ideology was still being formed, Israel chose to prioritize water and its water destiny over nearly everything other than its security and the ingathering and absorption of its immigrants. And it's because of that focus, as I tell in my book, that Israel has been able to achieve great things. Now, perhaps all of you have been to Israel, but certainly many of you have. And here I will share something that is not a secret, and that is that in my many, many, many trips to Israel, both for this book and otherwise, I have met many remarkable people, very many inspiring people, but I've yet to meet a single Superman or Superwoman. Everything Israel has done, we can do. Everything Israel has done, countries around the world can do. It's just a question of having a plan and having the desire and the focus to achieve that. And that's, in fact, the essence of what my book is about. It's a blueprint. It tells the story of how Israel achieved this and what we all can do and, in fact, must do if we're going to avoid a dangerous world future. Now, that man who gave that briefing, I mentioned at the start of my remarks, that man spoke of the consequences if we don't get this right, and they're grave. For sure, it means higher food prices everywhere. For sure, it means instability all over the place. He posited the possibility that it will mean the fall of countries important to U.S. security all around the world, important trading partners and allies of the United States. And one doesn't have to think very hard to understand that mass migrations of people leaving areas that have been deprived of its water will need to have to go to places where they hope they will find water. The instability that this will cause will be horrible, ruinous, and a historical epic that we don't want to experience. So if all the world will be a little bit more like Israel, a lot more like Israel in the way it looks at its water, its technology, its use of water, then the world can have actually a sweeter, happier, safer future. Now, actually, the part I like best about my presentations is the opportunity to engage all of you with questions and hear your comments. So I'm going to save some time so that we can do that. And I know they set up some microphones so that we can have a dialogue this morning. But I thought that I would take a few moments. To talk about how it is that Israel did this. And this is all recounted in the book. Most significantly, it's a revolution in agriculture. It's the use of technologies. It's the reuse of sewage and the pivotal, essential part of JNF in partnering with Israel in achieving these goals. And I want to close with this. It is often said that the wars of the 21st century will be fought over water. Now, that is certainly a possible outcome. I won't say it can't happen. But I want to posit to you a different outcome. And that is, as Israel has shown, as I speak about in my book, Israel has used its water for what a phrase I coin as hydro-diplomacy, to open doors, to change minds, to establish diplomatic relations, to create new friends, to engage in commerce all over the world. Today, countries that were not talking to Israel, had no diplomatic relations with Israel just a few years ago, thanks to water relations, are now trading partners and diplomatic partners and sometimes even allies of Israel. Israel trades water technology with 150 countries around the world, including some of those who viciously condemn Israel in international forums like the United Nations. But water technology and water technology trade serves as a backdoor way of dialogue and communication and opens doors with these countries in the way that it did previously with others. So let's hope that water can not only just be a source of better commerce and good livelihood for people, but actually as a pathway to peace for Israel and for everyone around the world. I'll pause here, and I'll be glad to take your questions.